Too late.
All
Late.
right.
We're starting early today, everybody.
Oh, we are. We're starting right now.
Yes, we are. You press the go button. We started.
I did.
Morning. Welcome, everybody. It is Saturday, December 23rd, 2023 at 8:59 a.m. We're getting an early start today. Good morning, guys. How you guys doing today? Merry almost Christmas.
Good.
And
Yeah, Merry Christmas. All
happy,
those early
happy
birds get to
Hanukkah.
catch the worm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't really feel like Christmas here in Florida. It's still pretty warm. So
Doesn't feel like Christmas that much here. It got cool, dude, but it's gonna rain all week. So
yeah, it's literally raining right now. If it was
is
colder,
it?
it would be snowing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
overcast here. It's like, but it's just staying warm enough that it won't snow, like it does
Yeah,
every year in New Jersey at
I
Christmas
know.
now.
Oh well.
What are you gonna do?
mhm.
It
Well,
is what it is.
yeah. Welcome everybody. If you're tuning in, today's topic is the freedom of coding, unlocking time and location independence through development skills. And I think this is go ahead, Randall. What do you got to say?
Before we get into it, people who are watching this video, let us know down in the
Yes.
comments, what about this intrigues you? Is it the location freedom? Is it just saying goodbye to a boss who just pisses you off? Are you just looking for a new start? Geez, I just got an Arrested Development, a new start, Tobias license plate thing right there. But what exactly about coding, time, location, independence appeals to you? Let us know down in the comments.
Yeah, let us know. Um, just pinging everybody so they can join in. All right.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this is a topic that sort of sits near and dear to all of us.
Yeah.
Because I know since I was probably in college, I wanted to travel and be able to do things wherever I wanted to go, right? Like right after college, I moved to California, then I moved back to the East Coast. Now I live in Florida and I love traveling. I love going to Mexico and I love being able to work while I do those things too, right? Because it's great to vacation, but I also enjoy working, oddly enough. Um,
You know,
so
it's funny.
yeah,
You totally like that resonates with me too. Like I like working. I enjoy what I do, but I like doing it also on my own time. And
yeah,
like, I noticed that about myself like a long time ago. Like, I hate when I have to be somewhere for a scheduled amount of time. Like,
yeah,
doesn't matter what it is, especially work though, because I just feel like it's such a like when you don't have stuff to do or when it's not a good time for you to work, you're still trapped there, and it's
yeah.
like so counterproductive and so unnecessary. And I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I remember like years ago when I used to, not even that long ago, honestly, when I worked an office job and just like part-time jobs, full-time jobs, and it just really sucks that you're stuck in a particular spot, right? Like your employer is literally paying you to not be able to go anywhere. You have to walk into a building and stand there for your whole life. And I think about that even now, um, like I have kids and they're like, they go to karate class, right? And this karate instructor is so dedicated to karate, but he literally spends 6 days a week from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. in the same exact building
Yeah.
his whole life. And it's awesome. He's dedicated to his work, but I can't imagine doing that. Like there's just so much freedom in being able to say, "Hey, I'm going to take a little break and like drive to the store or walk outside or do all these different things." And that's one of the things that I love most about software development is that every employer is going to let you do that for the most part, especially if you're working remote. But even so, like most office work environments for developers are Slack. Like I remember the last job I worked at was at an email marketing company and I worked as a salesperson, right? We were required to be there 40 hours a week. The development team was not. Like they could come and go as they wanted because they would just the employers knew they were like, we're at their mercy. They like build the thing that we sell. So we let them do whatever they want. And that's how it always is. Like, so
What and with technology too, it's gotten easier and easier to connect to your work remotely. Like it's not like it used to be. Like 10 years ago, this would have been very hard. Like
uh,
now with like all, I mean, like, with this, with Zoom and everything, I mean, it just makes it so much easier. And it also makes it unnecessary, I think, to go in. And it makes me more angry
yeah.
when I have to go somewhere because of that, you
Yeah,
know?
totally. Um,
Yeah, I can speak to that because my first job out of university, I was a developer, a satellite
yeah,
programmer. But this was not pre-internet, but this was like very, very early internet. So
yeah.
working remotely was not a real thing for the most part. And I went to work every day in a basement with a bunch of fat guys who hated their life.
Sounds
And
awesome.
dude, and so like when I ended up quitting there, this was a government job, so you're going to be there forever if you want to. I was like, I quit, I'm leaving, and they're like, but you'll have this job forever, and I was like, that's exactly what I don't want.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Please
But
no. Please no.
that hits on something too. Like I think both those examples, I really like the example of the karate guy one because
Yeah.
if you really love what you do, sometimes that sacrifice is fine. Like if he really
Yeah.
loves that, and that's the way to
Oh,
engage
that's
in
his
that,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But like what you were also saying too about that, like a lot of people have that mentality. Like, and I when I changed careers, I felt that too. Like, well, I spent all this time doing this. Do I want to make the risk? But when you think back on it, it's not a risk. Because if you're unhappy, it's not like it's going to magically get better. It's not
Yeah.
like it's going to magically change. And like, I know personally, like in my own experience, like teaching, like I just felt trapped. Like you can't go anywhere. You can't, like when you have good ideas, you can't just implement them easily. The universities are really a mess with like bureaucracy and crap and like
Yeah.
committees and stuff. And like I just felt there's so much more freedom in doing this. And I like working at home. It worked really well for me or wherever I am. Like I like being able to just be like, I can leave, go to the mountains for a week. And if I need to work, I can still work. And I can do it whenever
Yeah.
I want. So if I want to go hiking during the day and work from 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I think about this actually quite a lot is uh, when you look back upon your life, like when we're in our 80s, 90s, whatever, and we look back upon our life, do you want to look back on your life and be like, I spent all this quality time with friends, family, and doing the things that I love? Or do you want to look back on it and say, I sacrificed pretty much all the best years of my life
Yeah.
working to build somebody else's business at their expense, and I sacrificed being able to do the things that I wanted, and I
You
think about
sacrifice your
that a lot.
freedom, dude. Totally,
Yeah,
your freedom.
like
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
think
there
that's
was a
something
book.
big. Good.
There was a book, I think it's called The Five Regrets of the Dying.
Yeah.
Nobody ever regretted saying, "Oh, I wish I would have worked more." But like a
Yeah.
lot of people said, "I wish I lived a life truer to myself." And I think this is where one of the things that I want to talk about this kind of like being able to work remotely, time, location, independence is most people choose a job
Mm,
and then they're stuck whatever that job dictates. So like
Yeah.
somebody wants to make a lot of money, so they choose to be a lawyer, but they don't think about, well, that means I'm going to be working 90 hours a week for 30 years so I can become a partner so eventually I can get rich and retire. And it's like,
yeah.
whereas if you think about lifestyle first, what type of lifestyle do you want? Do you want something where you can travel all the time, where you can work at home, or do you want something where you're going to be in one spot? And that's kind of
Yeah.
up to you. But if you're looking for something that gives you more freedom over your time, over your location, uh, development works.
I think that's a good point too. Also, I think, I do believe too that development is like gives you a lot of flexibility just because it's always going to be needed. Like,
Mm,
so even if like, because I know plenty of people that like, I have a friend who's younger and, he likes going into the office because he lives alone. And, he does tech work, so it makes sense, right? You go in, you get, but, in a couple of years, he might not want to do that anymore. But the industry is set up in such a way that you have that mobility and that freedom because there's always going to be jobs and there's always stuff you can do freelance if you wanted to, if you don't want to, so it's easy to transition, to change, and to kind of get the type of life that you want. But your point's really good. Like you need to know what you want. You need to know what like is a good life for you.
yeah. I mean, like going back to what Randall said too, is like, you know, I think particularly in the United States, but I think it's pretty worldwide now, we put so much emphasis on how much money can we make in our lifetime, and somehow like people grade themselves on that. Their own confidence and their own worthiness is based on the number associated with their bank account. And I think in a lot of ways, like this is just my personal opinion, but that's such a flawed way of thinking, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all gonna die one day. And when we do, you don't take any of that money with you, right? And all you can do with that money is spend it in your life that you have now. And so all these people work, like you said, lawyers work a job, right, for their entire life, working 90 hours a week so that they can maybe retire one day and have a nice house that's like sort of like a show off to nobody because nobody cares, right? Like
Mhm.
you really cares about your house. It's just you sitting in your house alone, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all you've done. You've spent 90 hours a week in an office suing people so that you can have a nice house. Whereas like we can sculpt the life that we want by taking like these sort of, you know, steps towards something that we want. And I think software development for me is such a better way to balance like, yeah, I still want to make money, which I can do with software development. I can make a significant amount of money, but I can also have the freedom to work where I want, spend my time with who I want, build my own schedule. And what I think Danny made a good point of too is like you can always transition to something that you enjoy more, right? As a lawyer, you're basically locked into doing one type of law or really one thing for most of your life. Whereas as a software developer, like you could pick up tomorrow and choose a different coding language, a different, you know, style. Like all of a sudden tomorrow you could be like, I want to learn machine learning. And in a few months you could learn that and become dangerous with that, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas like you just can't do that in so many other industries. So go ahead.
Well, that's
Somebody,
what I really find appealing is that options, the continuous learning, because there's always going to be people creating new frameworks, new languages. There's always going to be a need for
yeah.
new stuff. We have I mean, you have the Web3 movement now, which is totally new. We talked
Mhm.
about that before. I mean, I think that just there's so many opportunities and they're there for us to create opportunities for ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like one thing I love too, like you were kind of hinting at too, is like I love the fact that like now that I work a lot of freelance and stuff, like I can just like if I want to go have lunch with my partner in the middle of the day, I can. I'm not constrained by
Yeah.
a place or by some stupid somebody else's rules set on me, you know, and it's like, and I think too, a lot of people are getting frustrated with, you know, full-time employment life because they're paying people less, they're demanding more. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I see people getting like text messages at midnight when they're off, you know, for
Oh
some
yeah.
problem. It's like, dude, like it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Randall, I think you
Russ,
said that years ago. Sorry.
go
One
on.
quick thing. You said this and it made a lot of sense to me is that software development is the most highly leveraged skill in the world. And it makes
Mhm.
sense, right? Because you basically, the world runs on software. And as a software developer, you're the person who builds that. And so everybody is at your mercy.
Yeah.
Mhm. And not only that, you can create one thing and then sell it a million times. And
Yes.
so, like, yeah, that's absolutely incredible. I wanted to touch on something that you were saying earlier about these guys who collect a lot of money
Yeah.
and how we worship them. So there's a really good book called Die with Zero, which is
Mhm.
basically about how these guys are living the most inefficient lifestyle ever. Because basically they're collecting a bunch of money, which means they're literally wasting their life to create something they're never going to be able to use. So
Yeah.
and so the whole book, it's an engineer wrote it about how to optimize your spending throughout your life so that you can die with as close to zero as possible.
Mm.
And the biggest thing that you hear is, well, if you have money left over, you give it to your descendants. But the average age for inheritance is roughly 60 years old, which is well after anyone could benefit from using that money. So
Yeah.
again, wasting your life completely there with doing that. Yeah.
I always found that funny. Like,
Most people don't act, that doesn't actually happen because they don't
yeah.
make a will and then it just goes to the state.
Well, you have
Yeah.
those
You're
problems, you
probate.
know, or that, you know, your kids die before you even pass away because that can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's lots of things that can happen that you can't predict. And I love that point too, because it's like, if that's one of the main things that interests you is helping the people you love financially and stuff, that's great. Do it when they really need it, you know? Help
Yeah.
them in the interim. It takes the stress off, and then you have more time to actually enjoy their time, you know, the thing that matters to you. And I think it's just funny how I do find it funny that we've made money the metrics for everything, and it's like the most toxic thing in the world because it confuses people from seeing the real quality and value in life, you
Yeah.
know, and all the things that make us people.
You know, I think it's weird. It's sort of like a weird catch 22, I guess, maybe is like as software developers, we're building things that take people out of the real world, right? Because they're like, people are just like zombies to the screens now. And that's the perfect antidote to what we're talking about, right? Because people have been trained so much to live outside of the real world that even from like a young age now, like there's a mall by me and they have little kids strollers. Like, so when you go to the mall, you put your kid in the stroller and there's an iPad built into it, literally built into it for infant children. I'm not
Like,
even
look, I'm gonna
crazy.
shop. You watch that, or you play that
yeah.
game. You
They're
shut
like,
up.
Warping their
I'm
brain.
gonna shop. You're gonna just sit in this thing. I'll probably forget about you and leave you somewhere, but at least you'll have your iPad.
Dude, you know what?
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger being so excited when my parents got me the Game Gear, which is totally dating
Oh,
me.
dude, game.
Handheld
Mhm.
system, right? It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I had to have been like, you know, young teens when I got that. And that was my first like individual thing, and it was awesome. But like it's so funny because now I go around, you see kids like literally like infants with like a phone or
Oh,
a
dude,
tablet,
it's
and it's
not.
like crazy.
I see it so
Mhm.
much here. Like, uh, particularly when I go out to dinner or something, I'll see, you know, parents and then like their infant child, and they just put an iPad in their hand so that they don't make a fuss during like a meal.
You
And
know what's
it's
funny?
Mhm.
crazy.
But that goes back to that whole work thing though, because people are stressed.
Yeah.
They're not making up. They're unhappy. And so they don't even have time to spend that quality time with their kids. They need their kids distracted. And you see this more and
Yeah.
more, you know,
It's
and it's sad.
really sad. Yeah.
So
So,
one thing that I want to touch on was kind of this transition, because a lot of people are in this spot where
mm,
they want more freedom, they don't like their boss, they're tired of their career, whatever it is. And a lot of these like these hypey personal development transformation things are like, jump, just quit your career. You
Yeah.
got to do it now and take out credit cards so you can buy my course that'll help you do it. And so like I've seen so many of those garbage things where they just want people to like jump and do, you have to make a big move right now, and including
Yeah.
paying for my next course. And so like I
so
think
convenient.
people, I
Yeah.
know, right?
It
I
is.
think I think people can get into a lot of trouble doing that because there's
Mm,
so much pressure, and then it's learning to be a developer is not something that you're going to do in a few weeks or months or even year plus. It takes a while, but
yeah.
like you can do small changes throughout every day while you're still working, earning money, because that's going to make your job more valuable. Like I remember back when I was working as a veterinarian, I also had a bunch of other irons in the fire of things that I was doing simultaneously to see which one took off. So then I could go in that direction. And it actually makes your work a lot more enjoyable.
Well, it also makes, yeah, it makes the job that you're doing more bearable. Like I remember like when
Mhm.
I decided finally that I was going to transition from teaching because I was just unhappy, I didn't quit because I had my health insurance through them. And like, you know, there was important reasons to stay. But what I did was I scaled back everything I was doing to the bare minimum and then refocused my time on things that were interesting to me to figure out where I wanted to go. And I think you made a great point. Like, yeah, dude, software development, like it wasn't until at least a year that I felt like comfortable, you know, and like felt like I knew enough and was beyond that like total new, you know, and like so it does take time, but you have to make that time for yourself and you have to do it in a way that works for you, whatever that is, right? And I think that's a
Yeah.
great point. Like you can't like I don't think burning the bridges is a good idea always, but reassessing your life and reconfiguring your schedule to make time to do those things is important because you should make the change. I mean, if you feel like you need it, you should make it because it's your
Yeah.
life and you only have one life. You
Yeah.
know, I think that is crucial.
So what do you guys think? Like, I'll make a few suggestions. What are some good ways that people can start making this transition, if you know what I'm saying? Uh,
Making this
uh,
transition.
into
Uh,
like a remote life, right? Because it is, there are some things we're talking, a lot of good things about doing remote work, but there's also some challenges that a lot of people face when they first do that, right? And so I'm gonna just name a few that I think you really need to get used to as a developer, and then you guys can make some suggestions as well. So I think
mhm.
number one is, if you want to eventually work on a remote team, you have to get used to using the remote tools that teams use, right? So um, there's a couple of them in particular for software developers that are really important. One of them, which is, we had a question about this, I think last week, is GitHub, right? So you need to understand how to use GitHub in a team way as well. So working with a team through GitHub, but just using it in general as a developer, even when you're learning, like that was something somebody asked, is how important is it to have all these green squares or like my commit graph being full? And my opinion is it's not extremely important, but it is important to understand how to use Git because if you are working on a remote team, you will use that pretty much daily. Go ahead, Dan.
Actually, one suggestion about that? No, because you're
Yeah.
totally right. And one way to do that really effectively, which we've done already, is just start a team project with a couple friends,
Yeah.
just to learn how to do pushes, pulls, and all that. Because then it's low stakes. You don't have to worry about it, and then
Yeah,
you're
and you
comfortable
guys
with
have
it.
a community here. Like throw a post
Yeah.
up on the community and say, "Hey, I'm looking to build a team project. Who wants to join? Trying to learn Git." And I'm sure you'll find a couple of people who are interested because I mean, I would even enjoy that.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's one is learning to use Git. Also using like Jira or like teamwork tools. So basically ticketing tools is like what they would use in the industry, which means basically anytime a feature needs to be built on, let's say, a web app, a ticket would be created for that and then assigned to somebody on the team. And that's how a lot of remote teams work in software development. So it's at least
Yeah.
expose yourself to that stuff because it's things that you will get in interviews. Like, have you used Jira or team working tools, things like that. We use Notion sometimes too, even.
Isn't
But
Ansible one of them too?
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's like a ton,
like,
I know.
but you don't need to know all of them. You just need to understand how to use one of them because that can be applied to pretty much any of them, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is getting, and this is something that is a little bit more difficult until you actually become more of a remote worker, is understanding how to do your own scheduling, right? Because you're going to be given sort of like a free, flexible schedule. And people are going to say, you just need to do this by this date. And it's up to you to figure out when to do that and how to assign that work to yourself. So maybe using, go ahead, Randall, you have a suggestion there?
Well, I think that this is an exceptionally important point, and this
Yeah.
kind of touches on that don't jump mentality
Yeah.
because you need to actually figure out that you enjoy coding. Like here's the
Yeah.
thing, everybody sees the picture we posted in this thing of this guy coding on a beach, and they're like, "That's the lifestyle that I want." But
Yeah.
that guy codes every day and he deals with problems every day and stuff he doesn't know every day. And you need to do this every day and
Yeah.
figure out that this is something that I enjoy and this is something that I can do, as opposed to somebody who just wants time and location independence because they hate their job or they just don't want to work because they're lazy. Like you need to figure
Right.
that out before you fully commit.
Can I
Yeah.
come out? No, that's a great point. I think one way I did that, at least personally, was, I mean, I already knew I liked technology, so that was helpful. Going to things you might like is a good way to start. But when I was learning, I scheduled a lot of time for learning to do it a lot because that proved to me, one, that I could commit to a schedule like that and do freelance, but also that I enjoyed it. If you can
Yeah.
commit to learning and still enjoy it after, say, 3 months, doing a couple hours a day, it's probably a good career move for you.
Yeah. The last thing I would say, the last point I wanted to make was figuring out ways to get yourself back into the real world. Because just like I was talking about how, we've been pulled out of the real world by all these devices that we use as a software developer, you spend a lot of time in front of a computer. And particularly if you're working in a remote environment, you're by yourself for the most part. I have the advantage of my girlfriend also works from home. So I at least have like one other person I can communicate throughout the day with that's in real life. But it can be difficult to just be on your own with isolated for many hours a day. So getting in the habit of going outside, getting some nature, and also just getting some human interaction is really important. And that could be, a sports league, it could be a club that you're part of,
Could
some
be
group.
coding at a coffee shop, right? It could be
It's
going to a co-working space and
and
renting a space for yourself. Like,
totally. And that's like one of the best things. Like I actually did that the other day. We went to a coffee shop and it was so refreshing to actually code. And I got so much work done because there's not the sort of home distractions of like, oh, I need to do this around the house or that. I could just sit there and code and I got a lot of work done. And so that was nice too. And you get to interact with other people. And that it seems silly almost in a way, like that we have to tell ourselves to interact with other people. But it's true.
yeah,
Really is. Go ahead, Randall. You had something to say?
Yeah, I go to a co-working space and it's like You know, aside from it being an office outside of the home where I'm super laser focused, it's also great because I've met so many other developers there and I get to talk
Yeah.
with them about what they're working on. They talk about what I'm working on. We get to, whenever I have problems, I can go to them and also can just form relationships with other people, which can be sometimes can be exceptionally difficult if you're working remotely, and especially if you're not leaving your house, or you know.
That is actually a great point for networking too. Is a co-working space is going to be full of people working remotely, and probably a lot of programmers. So yeah,
Yeah, and let me say this too. As a junior developer, somebody who's learning to develop, that will be to your advantage, right? If you don't have a lot of work experience, building a network is the number one best thing you can do to land a job, right? Because nobody knows who you are and you can make as many projects as you want, but unless you're making something revolutionary, you look pretty much the same as every other applicant, right? There's tons of applicants and there's a lot on the market now who have a lot probably more experience than you do if you're a
yeah,
junior developer. And so being able to network with people, it's so much easier because they know you on a personal level and they can see your work so they can vouch for you. I mean, this literally just happened to me the other day where somebody that I've worked with for a while was like, "Hey, I want to like give you a job because I've seen your work and it's so good that I basically told these people you're the only person who they can hire to do this." And literally, so that's going to
yeah.
work to your advantage as a junior developer to find a co-working space or somewhere where you can meet other developers, even if that's like a meetup event, right? That's outside of work and you're just going there for fun. It's a great way to meet other people.
I
Go
think
ahead.
one more point about that too. A lot of people in development, I know this from interviews too, struggle with communicating and
Yeah.
interpersonal relationships and stuff. So if you do struggle with that, because I know a lot of people have anxiety talking to people, like going out also is crucial too to work on that side of yourself, your soft skills. Like
Yeah.
even like this community can be a good way to do that too, because you do need to build those as well, and that will also set you apart. Being able to communicate effectively, being able to tell people what the problem is, explain it in clear terms, that's something a lot of developers do lack, and that can really set you aside as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Soft skills are very, very important in terms of becoming a good software developer because there's plenty
For
of
anything.
people for anything, really. Yeah. But like, there's plenty of people who can code, but half of them are not functional inside a work environment because they don't know how to communicate with other people or
Yeah.
pass ideas to other people. And that's a lot of what software development is. You're not going to code an entire web app on your own for the most part. You're going to do it with a team of 5, 10, 20, 30 developers. So you need to be able to communicate effectively with them.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions you guys have for people who are looking to make that transition into remote work? I have one more that I would say, but
Oh,
I can
you
make a
know,
couple real quick. Or do you
go
want to
for
go
it.
first?
No, go for it.
All right. I would just say too, like we've already said this a little bit, but know yourself, know what you want before you make the move. I think that's
Yeah.
crucial. Like, I really do believe, like, I know for me personally, like, I was so depressed at that time in my life because I was so unhappy with work. And looking back, I'm so happy I made the change, but it was a lot of work. So, like, knowing that you really want it keeps you motivated. And you also just see your life getting incrementally better as time passes because you're doing what you want and you're making it possible. But you have to create those opportunities. So if you want that freedom and stuff, you have to create that. That means you have to learn the stuff. You have to do these things. You have to go out and get jobs. You have to go out and look for work. It's a lot of work, but if you really want it, it's worthwhile. And I think, it's the best decision I ever made, but it was one that was right for me. So keeping that in mind is really important. Um, the other thing I would say is like, know yourself with time management, of course, that's crucial. You need to be able to work on your own. And just to reiterate, I would definitely work on communication too, because I think that sets you apart so much from everybody else, and it's critical to solving problems.
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and I would say use a job that you hate to your advantage. Like
Yeah,
this is something that I did when I was going from being a veterinarian to not, was I had this boss that I could not stand. Like literally it's still like I think about her and it makes my
Cringe.
skin crawl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
And like and for 3 years I was working underneath her and it was terrible. But this was something that like every time I would just be like, well, I just need to do something because this is not bearable. And like that was probably one of the biggest blessings, was having a job that I hated that much, that made me, and I was willing to do anything to get out from under it. So like if you guys are stuck in a position where you hate your job, you really need to change careers, whatever it is, like don't just quit that. Use that to your advantage. So eventually you can learn what you need to learn, you can get the development job, and then you can, tell them to shove it.
No, I just want to say that's a great point, dude, because that actually really helped me stay motivated, was how much I hated my job and how
Mhm.
upset I was with it. Like it kept me laser focused. And it also just every time I got like, if I got like, upset coding or got like, imposter syndrome, I would just look at what I was doing. I was like, no, this is worth it because I don't ever want to go back to that again. And like that is a really good point. Like using that as your motivation and to your advantage to keep you going is like really good.
Yeah. Very good point. My last one is this before we sort of end it, and that is that software development is a roller coaster and expect it, right? So I remember when we were in our boot camp, we were learning React, and there were days and multiple days where I was banging my head against the table and saying, "This doesn't make any sense. This is so stupid. Why would I write like 1,000 lines of code to make a hello world, you know, app or page or whatever?" I just didn't get it, right?
And install
And
500 megabytes of
yeah,
dependencies.
yeah, like right. So, and I think my point with that is just understand that it is a roller coaster. Like I'm in the process of learning Next.js right now, and I felt the same exact experience yesterday, but I remembered my experience from React, right? And I remembered that yes, there will be days where I just want to punch my computer, like punch a hole through my computer with my fist,
Yep.
but that's okay. And I'm gonna work my way through it and figure out a solution. And so just knowing that in the back of my head, like in that moment, and remembering, hey, I felt this way about React at one time, but now I can code React in my sleep. It matters, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a roller coaster. You're going to go through these like super high feelings of like, oh my God, I just built the coolest thing. And then these super low feelings of literally nothing works today, right?
I'm an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that and just going through that sort of visceral experience is good. It's okay, and be prepared for that. So
Can I make one last point too?
yeah, yeah.
I know this helped me a lot, and we talked about it before, I'm sure, but like when you're getting into this too, set a plan for yourself of not, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn Python in 24 hours or a month.
Yeah.
Look at like, where can I be in a year? Where can I be in 2 years, 5 years? And then
Yeah.
when you get to that year, look back at what you've learned and you'll be impressed and you'll see the growth. Day to day, it's hard sometimes. And I think I struggled with that early on, was like day to day, am I learning anything? But then when I look back a month, a year, 6 months, I see how much progress I've made, and you see it go faster and faster as you get better and better. And I think that is like, have a long-term plan, because I think we all screw ourselves over when we think short term because we think things are going to change dramatically overnight and they won't.
Yeah. Randall talked about this a second ago about the ultra earners or like people who just
Yeah.
collect money, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones that came to my mind when you said that was Jeff Bezos, right? And I saw this thing the other day that where Jeff Bezos was talking about basically what he attributes his best, like the most value that he has in terms of like making money, what he attributes to that is long-term planning. He is like, that is the number one thing that he attributes to his success, let's say it that way, is his ability to plan out in the future, not a month or 2 months, but 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, right? As far out as he can, because that gives you this longer perspective, and it actually makes it easier to accomplish goals. Because if we say, hey, I'm going to become a millionaire in the next year, that's a very unrealistic goal, and it doesn't help you in terms of like your brain psychology and like dopamine release when
Yeah.
you get a year goes by and you're still only making whatever you were the year before plus maybe 10%, right? Because then you're like, I failed. But if you look at it from the perspective of 10 years, right, or 5 years, and the same with software development, if you're like, I'm going to become, I'm going to get a job at Google in the next year, that's pretty unrealistic, right? But if you think about it like, my goal is to get a job in 5 years at Google, then there's a much more realistic time frame, and you can set steps up for yourself, right? You can say, well, maybe the first job is not at Google because they won't just hire me as a junior developer. Maybe it's I get a job at a local company who just needs somebody around here, and then I can work my way up and learn the skills that somebody working at Google will know or they will want to know. So having that long-term perspective, I think, is so, so helpful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a pleasure. And thank you again for, coming every week to hang out with us. I didn't really see any comments today, so we're not going to answer those because there's none. But happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, which already passed, I think. But and Kwanzaa, don't forget Kwanzaa, and all the other holidays out there. So
Yeah, lots of them.
Festivus.
For the rest of us.
What other holidays do you guys know happen this time?
Ramadan.
There's a
Happy
lot of
New
them.
Year. Now we'll see you next week on Saturday at 9 a.m. right here on Facebook. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you. Peace out.
Later, fellas.